Once there was a teen girl named Diana who had always been prone to nightmares. As a child, she had terrifying dreams of being chased by shadowy monsters and falling into endless pits. But as she got older, her nightmares began to change. They became more vivid, more lifelike. And soon, they started bleeding into her reality. At first, it was just little things. Diana would see glimpses of her dreams in the world around her. A tree would look like a monster's claw, a cloud like a skull. She could shake them off, convince herself that they were just tricks of the light. But then, things got worse. One night, Diana dreamt that she was trapped in a dark room with no way out. She could hear the sound of someone breathing, but she couldn't see who it was. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, and Diana knew she was not alone. She woke up screaming, covered in sweat. The next day, Diana found a strange note in her locker. It was written in a spiky, unfamiliar handwriting, and it read,
"I see you, Diana. I know your fears."
Diana was unnerved, but she tried to brush it off. Maybe it was just a prank. But as the days went on, more strange things started happening. Diana would catch glimpses of shadowy figures out of the corner of her eye, hear whispers in her ear when no one was there. And every night, her dreams grew more and more vivid. One night, Diana dreamt that she was in a graveyard. She could feel the cold wind on her face and hear the sound of creaking trees. She saw a figure in the distance, and as she got closer, she realized it was a boy she knew from school. But he was different in her dream. His eyes were black, his skin was pale, and he was holding a knife. Diana woke up in a cold sweat, gasping for air. And then, she saw him. The boy from her dream was standing at the foot of her bed, his eyes glowing in the darkness. Diana screamed, and her parents came running. But when they turned on the light, there was no one there. They told her it was just a nightmare, that she was imagining things. But Diana knew what she had seen. The next day, the boy from her dream didn't show up at school. No one seemed to know where he was. Diana was worried, but she tried to convince herself that it was just a coincidence. But then, another note appeared in her locker.
"You can't run from me, Diana. I'm coming for you."
Diana was terrified. She didn't know who was sending the notes, or what they wanted from her. She tried to talk to her friends, but they didn't believe her. They thought she was just being paranoid. And then, the nightmares took a dark turn. Diana dreamt that she was being chased through a dark forest by an unseen force. She could hear the sound of snapping twigs and heavy breathing behind her. She stumbled and fell, and when she looked up, she saw the boy from her dream standing over her. But he wasn't alone. There were other figures with him, shadowy and indistinct. They closed in on her, and Diana knew that this time, it wasn't just a dream. She could feel their cold breath on her skin. Diana woke up screaming, but this time, she wasn't alone. Her parents rushed into her room, but they were too late. Diana was gone. The police searched for her for weeks, but there was no trace. Her friends mourned her, but they never found out what happened to her. Years went by, and Diana's disappearance became a cold case. Her family moved on, but they never forgot her. Her mother, who had suffered a lot after her daughter's disappearance, developed dementia and had to be placed in a nursing home. One night, Diana's mother had a nightmare about her daughter. She saw Diana standing in front of her, but something was off. Her daughter looked different, like a nightmare version of herself. Her eyes were black and her skin was pale. The nightmare version of Diana slowly approached her and whispered something in her ear before disappearing. When her mother woke up, she realized that something was different. Her room looked slightly off, and she could hear a faint sound of footsteps coming from outside her door. As she got out of bed and looked around, she saw Diana standing in front of her. But it wasn't the Diana that she had remembered. It was the nightmare version of Diana that had entered reality. Diana's mother screamed for help, but the nurses didn't believe her. They thought she was just imagining things, a symptom of her dementia. But Diana was real. She was back, and she was seeking revenge on the people who had hurt her. Diana's nightmare version was stronger, faster, and more vicious than anyone could have imagined. She had supernatural powers and was able to control people's minds. Her mother was the first to fall under her spell, and she became her pawn. Diana began her rampage, taking out everyone who had doubted her when she went missing. Her friends, her family, even the police officers who had failed to find her. No one was safe from her wrath. But as Diana's power grew, so did her anger. She began to lash out at anyone who crossed her path, regardless of whether they were involved in her disappearance or not. She became a monster, a force of pure vengeance. In the end, there was no stopping her. Diana's nightmare version was too strong, too powerful. She continued to wreak havoc, destroying anyone who stood in her way. And then, one day, she simply disappeared. No one knew where Diana went or what became of her. Some believed that she was still out there, hiding in the shadows, waiting for her next victim. Others believed that she had simply faded away, a nightmare that had finally come to an end. But Diana's mother knew the truth. She knew that her daughter was still out there, watching over her, protecting her from the people who had hurt her. And even though she couldn't remember who Diana really was, she knew that she was loved, and that she would always be a part of her life.